The dueling instructor's safety protocols just failed for the first time in 6 centuries, and the human girl is pulling something that definitely shouldn't exist out of her equipment bag. Evacuation protocols initiated, the training facility's AI announced with what instructor Kale Thus would later swear was genuine panic in its synthetic voice. Unregistered weapon signature detected. Class dismissed. All students exit immediately through... Wait, what? Emma Williams looked up from her bag, one hand wrapped around a leather-bound handle. I just got here. Did I miss an email about class being canceled? Kael'thas's 4 eyes widened in perfect synchronization, his secondary arms instinctively reaching for the emergency communicator at his belt. In 230 years of teaching advanced combat techniques at the Galactic Academy, he had never, not once, seen the training room's containment fields activate to full military-grade specification. They were active now. Glowing barrier walls materialized around the practice arena, the kind of shielding typically reserved for handling antimatter or containing singularity weapons. The 36 alien students scrambled toward the exits, their various appendages moving in species-specific patterns of alarm. Miss Williams! Kael'thas kept his voice level through decades of professional training, even as his combat implants screamed warnings directly into his neural cortex. According to YouTube analytics, 99.6% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. I need you to very slowly place whatever you're holding back into your bag and step away from it. Emma blinked at him, genuinely confused. It's just my uncle's sword. The equipment list said to bring our own dueling weapon if we had one, and I thought, stop! Security Chief Vexia materialized in the doorway, her tactical armor already deployed, weapon raised. Behind her, 6 more security officers took position, their scanning equipment painting Emma with enough sensor beams to analyze a small moon. Human, you are in violation of Station Regulation 447 Alpha. Possession of an unregistered Class Omega weapon in an educational facility. Class Omega? Emma's eyebrows shot up. This thing? It's like 400 years old. My uncle got it at an estate sale. Kael'thas felt his teaching career flashing before his eyes as the sword, no, the weapon, cleared the bag. It was roughly a meter-long, dull gray metal that looked like it had been forged in some pre-industrial nightmare. No power cell, no energy matrix, no quantum field generator, just metal, shaped sharp, and every threat detection system in the facility was losing its collective mind. The safety AI just classified it as a relativistic impactor, Vexia said quietly, her voice tight with professional control barely masking existential dread. Threat level is reading as station kill capable. It's a sword, Emma protested, holding it up. Look, you can see where the edge is dinged from when my uncle let his friend use it for opening shipping. Containers. Don't wave it around, 36 voices shouted in unison, students, security, and Kael'thas himself. Emma froze, the longsword held awkwardly at shoulder height. Okay, she said slowly. I'm getting the feeling I maybe should have asked more questions before bringing this to class. The training room's AI spoke again, its tone now carrying what could only be described as electronic resignation. Historical combat protocols from Terran Archive accessed. Classification: Medieval Human Warfare Implement. Casualty projections, recalculating. Error: defensive parameters insufficient for modeling. Kael'thas watched his entire lesson plan for the semester dissolve into irrelevance. The training sabers his students carried, elegant devices that simulated combat through controlled energy fields, completely incapable of causing actual harm, suddenly seemed like children's toys. Because they were. Command, this is Vexia, the security chief said into her communicator, never taking her eyes off Emma. We have a confirmed historical human weapons situation, requesting immediate response from xenoanthropology and historical weapons experts. And, yes, Command, I know how that sounds. I need them anyway. Emma shifted her weight, still holding the sword, because apparently no one had told her where to put it. So, class is definitely canceled then? Because I have orbital mechanics in 2 hours and I really can't miss it again. Miss Williams, Kael'thas said carefully, that weapon you're holding is reading on our sensors as more dangerous than the training antimatter warheads we use in advanced tactical courses. That's ridiculous, Emma said, laughing. It doesn't even have batteries. Yes, Vexia said grimly. We've noticed. Dr. Zara, the station's chief weapons analyst, arrived within 3 minutes, which was impressive considering she'd been in the middle of lunch 4 decks away. She was not impressed by what she found. You evacuated 6 training halls and initiated station-wide tactical protocols, she said, mandibles clicking in irritation, because of a primitive kinetic implement? Run your scans, Vexia said flatly. Tell me I'm overreacting. Zara's sensors hummed to life, washing over Emma and her uncle's longsword with enough analytical power to deconstruct a molecule. The humming stopped, started again, stopped. That's impossible, Zara muttered. The material composition is iron-carbon alloy, essentially advanced rust shaped into a blade form. There's no power source, no energy signature at all, no quantum effects, no exotic matter. It's just metal, Emma offered helpfully. Yeah, that's what I've been saying. But the threat assessment is reading as Zara checked her display again, her voice climbing several octaves. According to our analysis, that object is simultaneously harmless primitive matter and capable of penetrating Type 7 military shielding. Both readings are confirmed. That's not possible. Those states are mutually exclusive. Kael'thas gestured to the training dummy at the center of the arena, its shields now operating at maximum defensive capacity. Our safety systems treat that primitive matter as an existential threat. The training sabers we use are rated to be absolutely incapable of causing injury. They've been refined for 6 centuries specifically to ensure perfect safety. Right, Emma said, nodding along. Makes sense. Safety first. Those sabers, Vexia continued, pulling up a holographic display, utilize predictive shielding. They scan incoming attacks, analyze the energy signature, and neutralize the threat before impact. Perfect protection, mathematically proven, physically impossible to bypass. Emma looked at her uncle's sword, then back at the security chief. But this doesn't have an energy signature. The silence that followed was profound. Oh, Zara said softly. Oh no. What? Emma asked. What? Oh no! Kael'thas felt something cold settle in his primary stomach. The predictive shielding works by detecting the incoming weapon's energy output and generating a proportional defensive field. If there's no energy to detect, then there's nothing to predict, Zara finished. Nothing to analyze, nothing to neutralize. She looked at Emma with something approaching horror. That weapon is functionally invisible to our defensive systems because it's too primitive to register as a weapon. Okay, but that doesn't make it dangerous, Emma said reasonably. It just means your shields won't waste power blocking something that can't hurt you anyway, right? 3 more weapons experts had arrived, summoned by increasingly desperate calls from the security team. They conferred in hushed tones, pulling up historical databases that clearly hadn't been accessed in decades. Found something, one of them announced, a Korthian named Rahil. Terran historical combat records from their pre-contact era. There's a note here from the first Federation observers who visited Earth. He paused, reading. It says, indigenous humans engaged in warfare utilizing unpowered kinetic weapons for approximately 6,000 years. Casualty rates were unexpected for such primitive technology. Recommend detailed study before establishing standard defense protocols. And did anyone do that study? Vexia demanded. There's a note that says, pending, from 240 years ago. Emma raised her hand like she was still in primary school. Can I just say something? This is literally just a sword. You swing it, it cuts things. That's the whole deal. I don't understand why everyone's acting like I brought a bomb to class. Demonstrate, Kael'thas heard himself say. His professional curiosity was warring with his survival instincts, and curiosity was winning. Show us a basic strike, against the training dummy, just slowly. Emma shrugged and walked to the center of the arena, her casual posture a stark contrast to the 8 armed security officers tracking her every movement. She took a stance that looked oddly natural, feet shoulder-width apart, sword held in a 2-handed grip. This is just a basic overhead cut, she said. It's like the first thing they teach in the historical martial arts club back home. You ready? Wait, Zara began. Emma swung. It wasn't fast. It wasn't particularly graceful. It was just a young woman moving a meter of shaped metal through an arc that terminated at the training dummy's shoulder. The dummy's shields activated perfectly, exactly as designed. Overlapping energy fields materialized in a mathematically precise defensive matrix, capable of stopping plasma weapons, kinetic slugs, and even exotic energy attacks. The sword went through them like they weren't there, not through. That implied resistance. The blade simply occupied the space where the shields were, and the shields seemed genuinely confused about what to do with that information. There was no flash of impact, no energy discharge, no dramatic effect. The sword bit into the dummy's outer casing, material rated to withstand direct hits from military-grade weapons, and stopped about 3 centimeters deep. Not because the material was strong enough to stop it, but because Emma stopped swinging. See, Emma said, pulling the blade free. It barely even scratched it. Your shields worked fine. No, Kael'thas said, his voice hollow. They didn't. They activated. They functioned exactly as programmed. The sword simply didn't care. Rahil was frantically reviewing the sensor data. The defensive field was perfect, full power, optimal frequency. The blade had no energy signature to overcome the field with. It just passed through. The field and the blade occupied the same space simultaneously because the field's programming has no category for unpowered sharp object moving through space. How? Vexia demanded. How is that possible? Emma scratched her head with her free hand. I mean, it's just physics. Metal is hard. Shields are energy, right? Energy doesn't stop matter from moving unless it's got enough force behind it, and your shields are designed to counter energy weapons, so they're not really optimized for something that should be completely obsolete, Zara finished. For something so primitive that our defensive systems never considered needing to stop it. Kael'thas looked at his training sabers, centuries of technological refinement, perfectly safe, absolutely reliable, and realized they were useless. Worse than useless. They had created a false sense of security based on the assumption that all weapons would follow the same technological progression. Humans, apparently, hadn't gotten that memo. Miss Williams, he said carefully, how many of these does your uncle have? Uncle Mike? Oh, like 40 or 50, I think. He's really into collecting them. He's got swords, axes, spears, halberds. Basically, if it's a medieval weapon, he probably has 3 of them. 8 security officers checked their defensive equipment simultaneously, suddenly very aware of its limitations. And these are common on Earth? Vexia asked. These collections? Yeah, tons of people have them. Historical reenactment is super popular. There's this whole community of people who study ancient fighting techniques and make replica weapons and... Emma stopped, reading the room. This is bad, isn't it? Bad, Kael'thas repeated, is not quite the word I would use. The emergency conference room was standing room only within 10 minutes. Dean Sylar presided over what was rapidly becoming the most uncomfortable faculty meeting in Academy history, with representatives from station security, weapons research, human-alien relations, and the legal department all trying to talk at once. Emma sat in the center, her uncle's longsword now safely in a containment case that everyone knew was purely for show, since the weapon couldn't actually be contained by energy fields. She looked profoundly uncomfortable. "Let me make sure I understand," Dean Xylar said, his crystalline features reflecting the conference room lights in agitated patterns. "This human student brought what our systems classify as a Class Omega threat to a beginner dueling class." "That classification is incorrect," Zara interjected. "Class Omega requires an energy signature above." "And yet," Selar continued, "every threat assessment system we have insists this object is capable of killing everyone in this room, penetrating our shields, and potentially hulling this station if wielded with intent." "Well," Emma said quietly, "I mean, you'd have to swing it really hard to get through the hull, and there's no gravity in space, so the leverage would be weird and—" "Miss Williams, please." Emma fell silent, her face reddening. Kael'thas stood, his teaching robes feeling suddenly ceremonial and useless. "With respect, Dean, the issue isn't the weapon itself, it's what the weapon represents. Our entire combat training curriculum is based on energy weapons and shields. We teach students to read energy signatures, predict weapon behavior, and counter with appropriate defensive fields." "That's correct," Selar said. "That's galactic standard combat theory, refined over millennia." "And it's worthless," Kael'thas finished, "against something that has no energy signature to read." The room erupted in protests. Kael'thas held up one of his training sabers, activating it. The blade hummed to life, a perfect column of contained energy, safe and reliable. "This," he said, "is the pinnacle of training weapon technology. It cannot cause permanent injury. The safety AI monitors every strike, every block, every movement. If a student loses control, the blade automatically deactivates. If someone's vitals spike, the blade deactivates. If the motion paths suggest possible harm, the blade deactivates." He looked at Emma's containment case. "That doesn't deactivate. That doesn't care about safety protocols. That doesn't have an AI to override." "It's also not going to activate itself and attack someone," Emma muttered. "It just sits there until someone picks it up." "Which is somehow worse," Vexia said from her position by the door. "Our weapons are smart enough to prevent accidents. Terran weapons require the user to actively prevent accidents through skill and attention." Rahil pulled up a holographic display showing Emma's earlier demonstration. "I've analyzed the strike pattern. The human used what the historical database calls proper edge alignment. The blade was angled to optimize cutting efficiency. This is a learned skill. It requires training to execute correctly." "So?" someone from the legal department asked. "So humans spend years learning how to efficiently kill things with unpowered chunks of metal," Arhil said, "and they do this recreationally. For fun." The room fell silent again. Dean Xylar rubbed his primary eye ridge. "Miss Williams, how long have you been studying this historical combat?" 3 years? "I joined the club freshman year. It's good exercise and the people are nice." "And in 3 years, how proficient would you say you've become?" Emma considered. "I mean, I'm okay. I know the basic cuts and guards for longsword. I'm working on proper footwork. I'm nowhere near as good as the people who've been doing it for like 10 years, and they're still not as good as the real medieval fighters were, because, you know, those guys did it for survival." "For survival," Sheila repeated. "Yes, that's the concerning part." He pulled up his own display, showing a historical document. "I've been reading the pre-contact reports from Earth. Do you know what the Federation observers found most disturbing about human military history?" Emma shook her head. "The efficiency," Sylar said. "Humans fought wars with these weapons for thousands of years, refined the techniques, developed entire martial traditions around the optimal ways to harm each other with sharpened metal. The casualty rates in some conflicts," he trailed off. "Let me put it this way, you've brought more concentrated combat expertise into my training facility than most of my students will develop in their entire careers." That's insane, Emma protested. I'm a 19-year-old engineering student who does sword practice twice a week. I'm not a warrior. No, Kael'thas said gently, but your ancestors were, for a very long time, and apparently they were terrifyingly good at it. Zara had been running simulations on her portable unit. I've been modeling various scenarios. If Miss Williams were to face off against one of our advanced combat students using a training saber. She paused. The simulation won't complete. The combat AI can't calculate a valid defense against an unpowered blade because all defensive programming assumes an energy signature to counter. So I'd win? Emma asked, sounding shocked. No, Zara corrected. The simulation predicts the training saber student would attack using standard protocols. Their blade would be read by their opponent's defensive systems, and appropriate counters would deploy. You would attack, your weapon would be invisible to those same systems, and your strike would land undefected, in a real combat scenario. She didn't finish the sentence. This is absurd, the legal representative said. You're telling me that a primitive weapon made of basic metal is superior to centuries of advanced technology? Not superior, Vexia corrected. Incompatible. Our technology is superior in every measurable way. Range, power, precision. But our defenses are optimized for that technology. We've been playing chess for so long that we forgot checkers was possible. Emma raised her hand again. Can I just say that I'm really sorry? I honestly thought it would be fine. The equipment list said personal dueling weapon, and I thought that meant. It did mean energy-based training implements registered with the Academy, Xylar said. Because that's what everyone uses. Everyone's civilized anyway. Hey, Emma said, her tone cooling. Earth is civilized. We just also remember where we came from. That, Kael'thas said, is precisely what makes this situation so alarming. The dean pulled up another display, this one showing enrollment statistics. We have 147 human students at this academy. If even a fraction of them have access to these historical weapons, if even a tenth of them have your level of training, you're worried about human students being dangerous? Emma looked genuinely hurt. We're not going to attack anyone. These are historical artifacts and sporting equipment. We're not barbarians. I don't think you're barbarians, Sealer said carefully. I think you're the descendants of barbarians who were so good at warfare that you had to invent entirely new social structures to stop killing each other. And I think your sporting equipment reveals just how good your ancestors were at their primary occupation. Emma was quiet for a long moment. My uncle always said that studying historical combat helps you appreciate why we don't do things that way anymore. He says every technique we practice represents hundreds of people figuring out what worked by trial and error, and that error usually meant dying. It's supposed to be humbling. It's humbling us, Vexia said dryly, just not in the way you meant. Rahil cleared his throat. I've found something else in the historical database. Earth has museums dedicated to preserving these weapons. There are millions of them in public and private collections. Millions of functioning blades that could, theoretically, defeat our standard defensive systems. Okay, but nobody's going to, Emma started. We know, Zilar interrupted. We know humans aren't planning to attack anyone with swords. But Miss Williams, you've just demonstrated that a fundamental assumption underlying all of our security protocols is flawed. Our shields don't work against your historical weapons because nobody thought they needed to. So update the shields, Emma suggested. To do what? Zara asked. Generate a physical barrier? That requires massive power increases. Predict kinetic impacts? We'd need to redesign the entire sensor suite, and even then, we'd be trying to defend against something that has 6,000 years of optimization behind its use. Kael'thas felt a headache forming behind his primary eyes. We need to update the combat curriculum. Add modules on defending against unpowered kinetic weapons, but that means admitting that our training sabers don't actually prepare students for all combat scenarios. And dealing with the political implications, Sylar added grimly. If word gets out that human historical weapons can bypass modern shields, every security force in the Federation is going to demand protocol updates. Every ship is going to need new defensive systems. The cost alone. I could just take it back home, Emma offered weakly. Pretend this never happened? Too late, Vexia said. This is now a station security incident. It's already been reported to Federation authorities. And Miss Williams, she actually looked sympathetic. You're probably going to be asked to demonstrate your techniques to a lot of very nervous military analysts. Emma put her head in her hands. My uncle is never letting me borrow his stuff again. 3 hours later, Emma found herself in a secure demonstration facility, surrounded by enough weapons experts and military observers to invade a small moon. Her uncle's longsword rested on a table between her and what looked like the entire Federation Security Council. Miss Williams, Admiral Jotaro began, his mandibles clicking in what might have been nervousness. We've reviewed the initial reports. Before we proceed, I need to clarify something. Is this weapon truly representative of Terran historical combat implements? I mean, it's a pretty standard longsword, Emma said. Maybe a bit heavier than average. Uncle Mike likes the sturdy ones, but yeah, it's typical of what European fighters used from about 1300 to 1600 AD. And these weapons were in common use? Another observer asked. Not rare or specialized? Emma almost laughed. Common. Swords were everywhere. Long swords, short swords, rapiers, sabers, katanas, dao, gladius. Every culture on Earth developed their own versions. And that's just swords. We also had axes, spears, polearms, maces, war hammers. She trailed off, seeing their expressions. You really didn't know any of this? The historical database is incomplete, Jotaro admitted. The pre-contact observers focused on humanity's technological capabilities, not your historical warfare methods. It was assumed that once you developed energy weapons, the primitive kinetic weapons would be obsolete. They are obsolete, Emma said. We use energy weapons for actual combat now, but the historical stuff is still around. Museums, collections, martial arts clubs, it's part of our heritage. Kael'thas, who'd been brought in as a consultant, stepped forward. Admiral, the issue isn't whether these weapons are obsolete for human use. It's that they're incompatible with our defensive systems. We've spent centuries developing shields that can stop anything from plasma bolts to antimatter, but we optimized for energy-based threats. Show us, Jotaro said, gesturing to a military-grade defensive drone hovering nearby. Attack that drone with your weapon. Full force. Emma looked uncertain. Are you sure? I don't want to break anything expensive. The drone is rated to withstand direct hits from squad-level support weapons, the Admiral said. Please proceed. Emma picked up the longsword, feeling the familiar weight in her hands. She took her stance, feet positioned, shoulders relaxed, blade held in guard position. 3 years of practice made the movements automatic. She struck. The drone's shields activated instantly, a shimmering field of energy precisely calibrated to stop incoming threats. The longsword's blade passed through the field, bit into the drone's armored casing, and lodged there with a solid thunk. Alarms didn't sound, no dramatic energy discharge. The blade was just there, stuck in a drone that should have been impervious. Emma wiggled the sword free. Sorry, should I have held back more? The observers erupted in agitated discussion. Jotaro held up a hand for silence. The shields functioned perfectly. Sensors confirmed they were at full power. But the weapon... He looked at Emma with something approaching respect. You're using pure kinetic force and material hardness. No energy signature for the shields to detect and counter. It's just basic physics, Emma said, feeling like she was repeating herself. Kinetic energy equals 1/2 mass times velocity squared. Make the sword heavy enough and swing it fast enough and you get penetration. Add a sharp edge to focus the force on a small area and... She gestured at the damaged drone. Zara was frantically taking notes. The cutting edge. That's the key element we missed. Energy weapons distribute force across their impact area. But a sharpened blade concentrates all the kinetic energy onto a line of contact mere molecules wide. The pressure per square centimeter is orders of magnitude higher than our shields are designed to resist. And humans figured this out thousands of years ago, R. Hill added, pulling up historical documents. Look at this, a treatise on sword design from 1350 AD. They understood blade geometry, edge angles, weight distribution. This isn't primitive technology. It's optimized technology using different optimization criteria than we're familiar with. Admiral Jotaro studied the damaged drone, his expression unreadable. How many humans have training in these weapons? Emma shrugged. Historical European martial arts is pretty popular. Maybe 1 million practitioners, plus all the other martial arts, kendo, aikido, Chinese martial arts, Filipino martial arts. Add in people who just collect the weapons without practicing. I don't know, tens of millions? The silence was deafening. Tens of millions of humans, the Admiral repeated slowly, possess functional weapons that can defeat modern defensive shields, and many of them have years of training in using those weapons effectively. Well, when you put it like that, it sounds bad, Emma protested. But it's not like we're planning to start a galactic rebellion with swords. We have actual modern weapons if we wanted to do that. The historical weapons are just heritage, sport, connecting with our past. A past, Kalthas said softly, where you were very, very good at killing each other. Emma couldn't argue with that. Jotaro made a decision. Miss Williams, I'm going to ask something unusual. Would you be willing to work with our combat training divisions, help us understand these weapons and develop appropriate defensive protocols? I'm a 19-year-old engineering student, Emma said. I'm not a weapons expert. You have 3 years of training in a martial art that none of our combat specialists can defend against, Jotaro countered. That makes you an expert in a critical knowledge gap. We'll compensate you, of course, and it would be appreciated if you could connect us with more experienced practitioners from Earth. Emma thought about her uncle who taught HEMA classes on weekends and loved nothing more than talking about sword mechanics for hours. I might know some people, but you have to promise this isn't going to turn into some weird thing where everyone's scared of humans because we kept our old weapons. Too late, Vexia muttered from her position by the door. We're not scared of humans, Jotaro said firmly. We're recalibrating our understanding of human capabilities based on new information. There's a difference. Is there? Emma asked skeptically. The Admiral actually smiled, a complex expression involving multiple mandibles. Miss Williams, humanity joined the Federation because you developed advanced technology and demonstrated you could be responsible with it. The fact that you also maintained expertise in more traditional forms of combat doesn't change that. It just means we have more to learn from you than we initially realized. Emma relaxed slightly. Okay, that's actually kind of reasonable. However, Jotaro continued, effective immediately, all human students at Federation institutions will be required to register any historical weapons in their possession, and Instructor Kalthas. Yes, Admiral? I believe your dueling class will need a significant curriculum update. Kalthas looked at his training sabers, then at Emma's longsword, and sighed. I'll start rewriting the syllabus tonight. 2 weeks later, Emma walked into Advanced Combat Theory to find the classroom completely rearranged. Half the space was now dedicated to what looked like a historical weapons display, with mounted examples of swords, axes, spears, and other implements that would have looked at home in a medieval armory. Kalthas stood at the front, holding both a training saber and a replica longsword. Welcome, students. Today we begin a new module, Kinetic Weapon Defense and Historical Combat Systems. The class, a mix of species from across the Federation, stared at the weapons display with obvious fascination and some nervousness. Thanks to recent demonstrations, Kael'thas continued, not looking at Emma, who'd slunk to a seat in the back. We've identified a critical gap in modern combat training. Our defensive systems and techniques are optimized for energy-based weapons. However, unpowered kinetic weapons, particularly those wielded by beings with appropriate training, represent a different threat paradigm entirely. He activated the training saber, its energy blade humming to life. This weapon is detectable at range. Its energy signature tells defensive systems exactly what kind of threat it poses. Appropriate countermeasures can be calculated and deployed automatically. He deactivated it and held up the longsword. This weapon has no energy signature, no electronic components, no systems to hack or disable. It is, from a sensor perspective, indistinguishable from a piece of decorative metalwork until someone swings it at your head. One of the students, a Korthian named Gunix, raised a tentacle. But instructor, surely primitive weapons can't compete with modern technology in actual combat. You'd think so, Kael'thas said. But consider, effective range of a training saber? Approximately 2 meters, Gunix answered. Effective range of a well-made longsword in trained hands? Also, approximately 2 meters. Exactly. In close quarters, ship corridors, station hallways, enclosed spaces, the range advantage of energy weapons disappears. And in those environments, if your shields are optimized only for energy threats, he demonstrated, striking the practice dummy with the longsword. The shields flickered uselessly as the blade connected. Emma's communicator buzzed, a message from Uncle Mike. Heard you caused an incident. Called by 5 different Federation military groups asking about weapons demos. What did you do? She typed back. Brought your longsword to class. Long story. You're about to become very popular with alien weapons experts. LOL. Told you that blade was special. The class continued, with Kael'thas walking through basic principles of kinetic weapon defense. Emma half listened, more focused on the increasingly absurd messages from home. Her HEMA club was being contacted by Federation Combat Research. The museum where she volunteered was fielding calls about their medieval weapons collection. Someone wanted to hire the Society for Creative Anachronism as consultants. Miss Williams, Kael'thas called out, interrupting her thoughts. Perhaps you could demonstrate proper blade alignment for the class? Emma trudged to the front, picking up the practice longsword. Okay, so the key thing to understand is edge orientation. If the edge isn't aligned with the direction of the cut, the blade will deflect instead of biting. You need to... 20 minutes later, she'd somehow become a guest lecturer on medieval combat theory to a classroom of aliens taking frantic notes. After class, Vexia was waiting in the hallway. Miss Williams, quick question. If it's about weapons, I've answered like 100 of these already, Emma said tiredly. Your uncle's collection. You mentioned he has approximately 40 weapons? 40 to 50, yeah. Mostly European medieval, some Japanese, a few Chinese pieces. Vexia pulled up a datapad. I've been reviewing Earth's historical weapons databases. There are approximately 847 museums with significant historical weapons collections. Private collectors number in the hundreds of thousands. Annual production of replica weapons for the martial arts community is estimated at over 100,000 pieces. Okay? And every single one of those weapons, Vexia said slowly, can potentially defeat standard defensive shields. Emma blinked. I guess. But they're mostly in museums or people's homes. It's not like there's an army of humans about to attack people with swords. I know that. Command knows that, but Emma... Vexia actually looked tired. You've accidentally revealed that humans brought to space not just your advanced technology, but also millions of functional weapons that represent 6,000 years of optimized combat engineering, and many of you actively maintain the skills to use them, because it's fun and historically interesting. I know, but from a security standpoint it's... She trailed off. Do you know what the Council's proposing? New shield protocols that can handle unpowered kinetic impacts. station security training for pre-technological weapons, updating defensive systems across the entire Federation. The cost is estimated at over 1 trillion credits. Emma felt her stomach drop. Because I brought a sword to class. Because humanity brought swords to space, Vexia corrected gently. Along with everything else from your history, the Council is calling it the Human Heritage Security Initiative. They're hiring consultants from Earth to help develop new protocols. That's insane. That's thorough. Vexia smiled, a complicated expression for her species. Look, Emma, nobody's upset with you. Concerned, yes. Recalibrating defensive assumptions, absolutely. But you've done us a favor in the long run. Better to discover this vulnerability in a training exercise than in an actual crisis. Emma's communicator buzzed again. Another message from Uncle Mike. Just got offered consulting job by Federation Defense. They want me to teach classes on medieval combat. Pays ridiculously well. You want me to say yes? She typed back, yes, someone should make money off my disaster. That's my girl. Your aunt says you're not borrowing the battle axe collection, though. Uncle Mike has battle axes? Vexia asked, reading over Emma's shoulder. Oh yeah, Emma said, like 15 of them. Plus the halberd collection, the spear collection, and I think he's got some medieval crossbows in the basement. Vexia made a note on her datapad. I'm adding a subsection to your file, Extended Family Weapons Holdings. This is my life now, isn't it? Emma asked. The human girl who accidentally made the entire Federation redesign their security protocols because of a sword. Could be worse, Vexia said. You could have brought the battle axes. Emma walked to her next class, Orbital Mechanics, where the only thing she'd need was a calculator, while her communicator continued buzzing with messages from home. The Society for Creative Anachronism was organizing a Federation demonstration tour. A blacksmith from Scotland was being hired to forge replica weapons for training purposes. Someone was making a documentary called Humanity's Forgotten Arsenal. She passed a group of students clustered around a display showing examples of historical human weapons, their various appendages gesturing excitedly as they discussed the implications. Did you know humans used these for 6,000 years? The edge geometry is actually quite sophisticated. My homeworld has nothing comparable in our history. Emma kept walking, trying not to laugh. She'd just wanted to participate in her uncle's hobby. Instead, she'd accidentally reminded the galaxy that humans had been really good at warfare long before they'd reached the stars, and they'd kept the receipts. Her communicator buzzed one more time. A message from the dean. Miss Williams, please see me regarding your independent study proposal. Comparative analysis of pre-technological combat systems. Your initiative in identifying this knowledge gap has been noted, approved with full academic credit. Emma stopped in the hallway, rereading the message. Then she called Uncle Mike. Hey, kiddo, he answered. What's up? How would you feel about teaching a semester-long course on medieval combat at a galactic university? I'd feel like my weird hobby just became a lot more interesting. Good, Emma said, grinning, because I think I just accidentally started a revolution in how the Federation thinks about human history. That's my niece, Uncle Mike said proudly, always swinging for the fences, or swinging swords at them, apparently. Emma laughed and headed to class, where the biggest threat she'd face was differential equations. Her uncle's longsword was safely locked in the academy armory, catalogued, registered, and scheduled for 3 different research demonstrations. And somewhere in the depths of Federation Command, entire departments were being created to address the question no one had thought to ask before. What else did humans bring with them to space? The answer, Emma reflected, was probably going to keep a lot of people very busy for a very long time.